This chapter is from 10 Girls Who Changed the World by Irene Howat, and this one is about Catherine Booth. The little girl sat in front of the fire with her picture book. Martha, her doll, was at her side. "See, Martha," she said, pointing to the words in the book. "Those letters are K-A-T, and the word says cat." She turned the page. "Those letters are F-O-X, and the word says fox." She pointed to the X. "But sometimes that means kiss," she explained. Then she picked up the doll and kissed her. "She's really a clever little girl," smiled Mrs. Mumford's visitor. "What age did you say she is?" "Catherine's 3, she replied. "She just seems to pick up letters as I read books to her." "You'll have to watch you don't exhaust her brain," warned the visitor. Mrs. Mumford smiled. She knew that Catherine's brain was not very likely to tire out. By the time the girl was 5, in 1834, she had regular lessons from her mother, although she didn't go to school. The book they read most together was the Bible, and by Catherine's 12th birthday, she had read it right through 8 times. But life was not all work. When her father went on business trips some distance away from their home in Boston in Lincolnshire, he sometimes took her with him. "Would you like to learn to drive the horse?" Father asked when she was about 9 years old. Catherine's eyes shone. "Yes, please, Papa." Pulling her onto his knee, he handed her the reins while holding them gently to stop the horse should he bolt. "Easy now," he said. "Just let the horse have his head." The creature walked along quite steadily. "Now let's try more difficult things," suggested Father, at a quiet part of the road. "Pull the right rein gently and see what happens." The horse turned toward the right and then walked on. "Now do the same with the left rein." The girl did as she was told and was delighted when the horse immediately obeyed her instruction and turned toward the left. "Mama," she called out when they returned home that afternoon, "I can drive the horse and carriage. Papa let me." "Catherine has a way with horses," her father says. Mrs. Mumford looked at her daughter. "You love all animals, don't you?" It was because Catherine loved animals that she was broken-hearted when her dog was put down when she was 12. She found it difficult to talk about how upset she was, though she did pray about it. Soon after this sad happening, the girl went to school, and how she loved it. But that freedom didn't last for long. Catherine developed a problem with her spine and had to lie in her bed for a whole year. "What would you like to do today?" her mother asked every morning when they finished their lessons. But she already knew the answer. "I'm quite happy with my books," was the girl's daily reply. For a year, Catherine read books that most adults don't even read. At the end of it, when her back was better, she had read very thick and serious books about God. For the next few years, she puzzled about the Lord. Did he really love her? Did she need to be forgiven? How could she know she would go to heaven? But when she was 17, the truth dawned on her. Jesus did love her. Yes, she did need to be forgiven. And yes, she knew she was going to heaven because that's what the Bible said happened to those who trusted in Jesus. And she was convinced that the Bible was true. Catherine was happy at last. Catherine and her mother were at a Christian meeting 3 years later, and it was there they first met William Booth, an apprentice pawnbroker. However, by the time he and Catherine fell in love, William was on his way to becoming a travelling preacher. For 6 years, the young couple wrote to each other, first once a week, then twice a week, and then nearly every day until they were married in June 1855. They were both 26 years old. "How are you managing all the travelling?" Mrs. Mumford asked Catherine in a letter. Her daughter answered the next day, "Dear Mama, William's tours are not as exhausting as you would think. We are usually in a place for about a month and people make us feel very much at home everywhere we go. We've seen some interesting places I'd never visited before. Hull was full of fishwives. They travel round the coast depending on where the herring is being landed. Then we were in Sheffield, where cutlery is made. After that we were in a month in Halifax. Please don't worry about me travelling, Mama. William looks after me wonderfully well. I've been asked to be superintendent in Gateshead, William told his wife some years later. She thought for a moment it would be nice to stay in one place, though I've loved our time of travelling. William's preaching still sometimes took him away from home, but Catherine was busy about her own things. By then she'd begun to do Christian work herself. This started when she spoke to women on the street about the Lord Jesus, and before long she was taking services. I'm very surprised at myself, she told William when he returned from 2 weeks away. He wondered what was coming. The Lord seemed to be leading me to speak to some people who were drunk. At first I felt very nervous, but he gave me the words to say, and now I find I can approach such people and tell them about the Lord Jesus. William was not as surprised as Catherine had been. He had watched her becoming more involved in the work, even though she now had their children to look after. Where would this lead? From Gateshead they moved south, eventually to London. More and more invitations came for Catherine to speak, and fewer came for William. It was a difficult time for them. One night she was home before him and sitting by the fire when he came in. "Oh, Catherine," he said, slumping down in his chair, "when I pass the drinking dens tonight, I seem to hear a voice in my head asking me where else I could find so many men in need of the good news about Jesus as a place such as that. I feel that the Lord is leading me to work here in the East End of London with these men and women." Catherine gazed into the fire. Where will the money come to support us? She wondered. The men in the drinking dens certainly won't keep 7 of us in food and clothes, and there's another baby on the way. But when she spoke, that was not what she said. The Lord has never let us down before. If he wants you to do that, he'll provide for us. William wrote to a Christian newspaper outlining his plans. Because most people in areas like this don't go to church, we will visit them and hold services where they are, in the open air, in theatres and in other places too. We'll go where the people are, not wait for them to come to us. And that was the very beginning of the Salvation Army. It was 1870, and after a huge effort to raise money, the People's Mission Hall was opened in one of the poorest parts of London. "When are your meetings?" a visitor at the opening service asked Catherine. "We're open every night," was the surprising reply. "There will always be an open door here for people in need. That's why we have a soup kitchen. Have you any idea how many hungry people there are around here?" The visitor took some pound notes out of his wallet and gave them to Catherine. "Here," he said, "that will buy vegetables for tomorrow's soup." The Salvation Army reached out to the poor and needy, taking the good news about Jesus in one hand and soup and warm clothes in the other. Where people were hungry, the army was there to feed them. Where people were cold, the army was there to give them clothes. And where people needed Jesus, the Salvation Army was there to tell them that he loved them enough to die for them. William became General Booth, a general in the Lord's army, and Catherine was given a title too, the Army Mother. The Booths never forgot their call to serve the drunkards, treating them with a love they found nowhere else. Men, women, and young people were loved into the Salvation Army, loved by the general and the Army Mother, and loved by the Lord Jesus. "Tell me about the Salvation Army meeting," a Scottish friend wrote to Catherine when he sent her money for the work. "If you were in London," she wrote back, "if you would know us right away because of our army uniforms and flags. The men wear hats and the women wear bonnets with crimson bands on, which are written, 'The Salvation Army.' Our meetings are lively, lots of singing and hallelujahs. nothing dismal and dull about our services at all. People come in off the streets just because of our cheerful music and joyful singing. Most of our people are poor, and many of them would never go to an ordinary church, but everyone is welcome at the army. Women and children have a special place. Women officers preach in the army as well as men, and we hold special services and missions for children. Will you come and help us on the streets this evening? Catherine asked a church visitor to their work. What would I have to do? The young woman wanted to know. 2 of you will patrol the streets you're given, looking out for people in need. You'll find wives whose husbands have thrown them out, sometimes wearing only night clothes with a coat on top, and often with children too. You'll find young people who have argued with their parents and run away. You'll find men and women who are mentally ill and need to be rescued. The woman looked horrified. But I've never met people like that before. I wouldn't know what to say. Catherine looked into her eyes. How long have you been a Christian? 8 years. And you've never reached out to the people who need you most? The army mother said sadly. The young woman's expression softened. No, she said, I've not, but I will tonight, and I will from now on. Later that evening, the 2 women met again in the soup kitchen. The visitor was flushed with excitement. Did God use you tonight? Catherine Booth asked. Her companion nodded her head. He surely did, and he taught me a lesson. What was that? The older woman wanted to know. Smiling, the visitor put into words what one evening on the street meant to her. I've discovered that being a Christian means being like Jesus. And tonight I've done what he did. I've held out my hand in love to people who aren't lovable. But there's one thing I'd like to ask you. Catherine wondered what it might be. I know you have a big family, she said. How did you manage to bring them up and still be so busy for the Lord? Didn't they feel neglected? The army mother smiled at the thought of her children. I've always made time for my children, she answered. You see, they are the very first mission field the Lord gave me. Every one of them is a Christian, and all but one is a Salvation Army officer. Thank you. That answers my question. You're the army mother, and you're a real mother to your own children too.